Today I'm going to be analyzing officially the mystery disappearance of the Clements family, that is Sue Clements, and some of her family members who come from the state of Ohio. They went missing and officially disappeared near Clingman's Dome in North Carolina. This is a bit different than a typical missing person type of situation. Certainly they weren't, possibly tossed overboard from a boat or forced to get out of a boat or anything. In this particular case, there's more of a mystery involved, which is right in the right genre for what I particularly look for. And what's interesting about Clingman's Dome is it's directly next to Great Smoky Mountains. That's correct. And not too far from Asheville, North Carolina. So I'm beginning to suspect, though it cannot be confirmed yet, I'm beginning to suspect a certain hunter may have likely been involved in this particular case. They were said to freeze, basically frozen to death, so to speak, in the hill region, the hilly area of the Great Smoky Mountains. But that's unlikely to be the case of what truly happened. And I suspect that it may not be this situation that people assume where they were lured out either. I'm believing now, based upon evidence that's been exposed, that they were stalked. And so this is going to be an interesting case. Look forward to it. This is about the missing hiker, the Clements. Thank you again. Here we go, folks, with the vanishing and disappearance of none other than the Clements family, which included Susan Clements, her direct daughter, and at least one other member. And this all took place in the Smoky Mountains, very interestingly, right directly by Clingman's Dome. It said 125 trained searchers with drones, cavalry dogs, helicopters from 30 search and rescue agencies also, including park staff, searched a large-scale area of the whole, landing surrounding Clingman's Dome. The weather was poor with rain, fog, wind, and low temperatures in the 40s, which hampered search efforts due to limited visibility. Verizon set up a portable cell tower as the area has poor cell phone service. Officials said the cell booster is providing critical data coverage needed to effectively manage and support the efforts. The search for Susan Clements lasted a week and involved 175 trained personnel from 5 states and 50 organizations. By October 1st, 2018, searchers had hiked more than 500 miles, and the intensive off-trail grid searches of more than 10 square miles in the steep and rugged terrain that straddles North Carolina's Tennessee border. The searchers were left frustrated by a lack of evidence. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation joined in the search along with Christian Aid Ministries, Search and Rescue Gatlinburg Fire Department, Haywood County Search and Rescue, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Tennessee Highway Patrol, and every other agency, including the Forest Service itself. So, in other words, they threw everything in the kitchen sink at this. The search crews finally found Susan Clements' body approximately 2 miles west of the Clingman's Dome trail and trailhead, 3/4 of a mile south, directly south of Appalachian Trail, right at the Huggins Creek. So, more importantly, this is making me start to recognize, as should some of you for sure, that this wasn't the only people who disappeared there. Also, Dennis Martin disappeared in this exact area. And they have really had no sign of him since. And so what makes me firmly believe, what leads me to unmistakably conclude at this point, that they were stalked directly by hunters is if you start to look at this story deeper, You see there's some very strange people who are going in the area of the Appalachian Trail and Clingman's Dome, shooting an awful lot of pictures. And when you go into this area, you're going to find this woman by the name of Stacey Riston. That's correct. And Stacey Riston, she lives in Indiana now, but her original address is on County Road in Chesapeake, Ohio. That's correct. And her real name is Stacey Clements. That is also correct. And so the reason that they would do something like this is very interesting to examine. And it's proof positive that the Clements family were being stalked. Because here is Stacey Clements herself as a member of the Craig long before 2004. And let me explain why this matters. Stacey Clements, was there involved in hiking and things like that long before 2004, so long before Susan Clements even disappeared at all, folks. And she is either the direct daughter of Susan Clements in some fashion, or she is more than likely, according to records, the cousin, meaning the bloodline cousin of Susan Clements. And so she was being stalked by the same people. And we know this because if we go back into this interesting situation, look at this. This is right directly by County Road where Susan Clements lived. This, I don't really care what anybody says, this looks like a murder room. This was directly by County Road in Chesapeake, Ohio, not far from Cincinnati. And this home is directly outside of that area. And when you look around this place, it's pretty unbelievable. It gives you a very, very dark feeling. This being right directly by a Union Mission Baptist church and several other churches, by the way, that associates of the hunters, specifically associates of Mr. Jones himself, were infamous to attend quite often. And you can't make this up. You look at the setting that this is in, and it is directly by the county road where Stacey Clements lived for a time. And why in the world was she living in such an area is a very good question. She had to have known she had been being stalked because what had happened before with Susan Clements and another member of the Clements family. So therefore, she had to have known ahead of time that it was time to move, and that's why she changed, attempted to change everything about how she looked, and moved then directly to Indianapolis. Now people will say, well, even the suspicious trucks don't really prove that they were being stalked by one of these hunters. But we're going to get to that, and we're going to cover that. Thank you. This was in fact a stalking situation that Susan Clements, and specifically her cousin long before that, and another member of the family, Stacey Clements in particular, were being stalked directly, that's correct, by these hunters. We see it also from the fact that many of the trucks, cars, and so on in this area in no way match what you would see from a tourist or someone just passing through. So it's been a very clear evil that's been going on here for a while, and they were being stalked by these hunters. Visitors can drive to the parking area near the top of the mountain and then hike a paved trail to the summit, where the well-known observation tower provides an incredible 360 view of Great Smoky Mountain. Clingman's dome holds many height records, including being the highest point in the GMSP. So there were some people that were taking an awful lot of photos here of the area around Clingman's dome, and specifically the park itself, that do not at all add up. Because, of course, see, the problem you run into is, again, Clingman's dome and the trailhead are directly next to Raleigh, North Carolina. That's right. And Raleigh, North Carolina is the home of Brian O'Connor, and he is, one of the key hunters that's directly been right beside Jones and so forth the entire time. And so there's no mistaking it. They were, in fact, stalked by these hunters. And by one of these hunters from the group. The circumstantial evidence has leaned heavily in that direction. The hard evidence seen for certain reports of where people were spotted at leans in that direction. And we're going to see more of why, too. It is, folks. This is it. Look at the fact that the cabin is out here. This is in Ohio, interestingly enough. And the lake looks very similar to Lake Monroe, Florida, and looks nearly identical, strangely enough, to the lake that's in North Carolina. And of course, we found that out right away, once again. It was very, very clear and obvious that this is, in fact, a key piece of hard evidence that proves outright the Clements were being stalked and followed, of course. We know this now because it's an exact match, literally, an exact match, identical, for the forest that Stacey Clements, aka Stacey Riston, frequently took physical photos of. So we know now, we can prove, start to prove beyond a reasonable doubt here that they were stalked directly by these hunters. There's no mistaking that fact. Why were they stalked? I don't like to get into that too much, folks, because that's for a separate video. But it's more or less the case that these people have certain kinds of power machination trips going on inside. And Brian O'Connor especially fits that definition, and he's a very close associate of Clark Jones. We know that. And of one of the other key hunters that's been involved in this. And so it's interesting to speculate on what their motives might be, but at this time, we just need to clearly understand that they were stalking them and they intended to murder them. That's correct. And of course, some people sometimes ask me, when are you going to go out on a date or a safari or something like that? Well, folks, that's not going to happen for a long time. Because now we have deployed officially the American Marshals. That's right. And they are active in every single state. And we want to catch, folks, every single one of these hunters who worked with you-know-who. And remove them and take them away, because now, of course, with the American Marshals, we can do exactly that. And why do we want to do that? Because they've been involved in these banks and this scam since the very beginning. And once they are taken away, finally, that will crash the currencies outright. And it'll be up to you folks to, at that point, decide through your own discernment whether you truly trust what the banks are selling you or not. That'll be up to you. But there will be a lot of folks who will never partner with any of those banks ever again and will go rightfully back to actual state, town, and county bank and stay there during this interesting time that occurs in the world. Because as you know, that same banking system, or what is left of it, because there's not that much left of it, will also be bringing in the final you-know-what. And people who have real discernment will know never to trust a single one of those banks again. And so that's what I wanted to discuss here. It's very important to get these hunters all off the street. And so we have the American Marshals out there in force, and we're going to find them and we're going to seize all of them, big time. Think about the fact that these hunters that are directly connected to Mr. Brian O'Connor, that's correct, have stalked and killed many people. We're talking more than 25 people, that's correct. Some of them directly in this forest that I'm walking through right now. And do you hear the U.S. Marshals talking about it? Hardly ever. But the American Marshals are hot on assignment for it, and they want to bring it to the attention of every single jury, and they soon will. Thank you. So, folks, some of you are going to be wondering about this whole thing, but yeah, sure, somebody might have been after her, but it's still circumstantial that anybody would have followed and murdered the victim, including Susan Clements. And I remind you guys, that's why this is partly a deep dive. It certainly is no longer circumstantial once you start weighing the weight of the evidence. And this is hard evidence that none other than Scott Stanley, believe it or not, was a infamous member of the Craig, and so was someone else directly related to Kenneth. Now, why is this very important to make very, very good note of? Because this is so important due to the fact that Kenneth T. also wrote a review of the Stonebrook Lodge, that's correct, right there in Bryson City, North Carolina, that's next to Raleigh. And when we go back and we check the Stonebrook Lodge Mile High Club, we find a man, Stanley Kenneth Jr., that's correct. And sometimes he has the last name Creswell. But Creswell isn't found in the Craig. Instead, his cousins are. Why is this important? Because, of course, I can now match Stanley Kenneth Jr. to an interesting man right here. That's correct. And this is indeed very plausibly the same exact Stanley that's seen on the hiking trail, because, of course, it turns out, ironically enough, he is best friends with William Jones and another member of the Jones family. And he's right there in Bryson City, North Carolina, outside of Raleigh. You cannot ever make anything like this kind of just unbelievable series of events up And so when we go back to the Craig, we see that once again some of Kenneth's direct cousins, specifically Stanley, once again, are official members of the Craig since 2004, sometimes before that time. That's correct. And so when we see this now for what it is, and really digest the full facts of what this means, what this truly means, of him being there near Bryson City, right out of Burlington, etc., and being so close to the Jones clan, etc., we see now for a fact that it adds up, folks. That's right. It truly finally does. Kenneth Wayne Stanley Jr., meaning Kenneth Stanley, in effect, and his last name may very likely be Creswell, or that could be his cousin. We don't know. That is harder to confirm. But he was involved in the stalking, and I will say it is even at least plausible at this point, the possible homicide, that's correct, of none other than Susan Clements. That's right, Susan Clements. And we see he is an official big-time hiker and friend of Jones. So would that not make him a direct associate of Mr. Clark Jones himself? I say we have a winner. Thank you. I really enjoyed documenting this, as well as the circumstantial evidence surrounding it, and some of the hard evidence too. So I just wanted to remark on the fact that, folks, the situation with Susan Clements and also other members of her family is extremely serious. And I would like to see certain parts of this case, not all, but certain key parts of this case, begin entering the courts in various areas, because it is very, very clear at this point that Mr. Kenneth, that is Kenneth Stanley, I guess you could call him, who appears to also be a friend, although he attempted to hide this, of Mr. O'Connor, that he start being seriously looked into, as well as a few of his pals, for the stalking and later murder of none other than Susan Clements. Now, we don't know how it might equate to murder quite yet, but we do know it's very plausible at this point that they may have trapped her in some kind of room or something. It's very strange how she was found, frozen, literally frozen. And so that will need to be officially investigated and looked into at this point to determine how she was frozen and how the other members of the Clements family allegedly disappeared. Because when looking at William Jones, that's correct, folks, this appears to be the same William Jones who was involved in the drug trafficking ring that was convicted in Pennsylvania. That's why I say this is a very serious set of allegations. It needs to be heavily combed over by the sheriff, and I hope that you guys will certainly spread this information far and wide. Let's make certain some of these suspects get looked into, and we bring justice, finally, to the Susan Clements mystery and the disappearance of the Clements as a whole in their family. And look forward to the Kylan Schulte case, Part 3, because there was something strange found at the Deer Creek campsite there in North Carolina, much similar to what was found at the campsite here in Utah a number of times. Thank you once again.